Some people, as well, others are believing that there's probably a conspiracy regarding the kind of like they call it the mass psychosis. So I'm going to watch the first few minutes of a clip about mass psychosis, and we just deliberate on that.
This after-school presentation was written and narrated by Academy of Ideas. Check out their YouTube channel for more of their videos. The masses have never thirsted after truth. They turn aside from evidence that is not to their taste, preferring to deify error if error seduce them. Whoever can supply them with illusions is easily their master. Whoever attempts to destroy their illusions is always their victim. According to the psychologist Carl Jung, the greatest threat to civilization lies not with the forces of nature, nor with any physical disease, but with our inability to deal with the forces of our own psyche. We are our own worst enemies, or as the Latin proverb puts it, man is a wolf to man. In Civilization in Transition, Jung states that this proverb is a sad yet eternal truism, and our wolf-like tendencies come most prominently into play at those times of history when mental illness becomes the norm rather than the exception in a society, a situation which Jung termed a psychic epidemic. Indeed, it is becoming ever more obvious, he writes, that it is not famine, not earthquakes, not microbes, not cancer, but man himself, who is man's greatest danger to man, for the simple reason that there is no adequate protection against psychic epidemics, which are infinitely more devastating than the worst of natural catastrophes. In this video, we are going to explore the most dangerous of all psychic epidemics, the mass psychosis. A mass psychosis is an epidemic of madness, and it occurs when a large portion of a society loses touch with reality and descends into delusions. Such a phenomenon is not a thing of fiction. Two examples of mass psychoses are the American and European witch hunts of the 16th and 17th centuries, and the rise of totalitarianism in the 20th century. During the witch hunts, thousands of individuals, mostly women, were killed, not for any crimes they committed, but because they became the scapegoats of societies gone mad. In some Swiss villages, writes Francis Hill, there were scarcely any women left alive after the frenzy had finally burned itself out. When a mass psychosis occurs, the results are devastating. Jung studied this phenomenon and wrote that the individuals who make up the infected society become morally and spiritually inferior. They sink unconsciously to an inferior intellectual level. They become more unreasonable, irresponsible, emotional, erratic, and unreliable, and worst of all, crimes the individual alone could never stand are freely committed by the group smitten by madness. What makes matters worse is that those suffering from a mass psychosis are unaware of what is occurring. For just as an individual gone mad cannot step out of his mind to observe the errors in his ways, so too there is no Archimedean point from which those living through a mass psychosis can observe their collective madness. But what causes a mass psychosis? To answer this question, we must first explore what drives an individual mad. While there are many potential triggers of madness, such as an excessive use of drugs or alcohol, brain injuries, and other illnesses, these physical causes will not concern us here. Our concern is with psychological, or what are called psychogenic triggers, as these are the most common culprits of the mass psychosis. The most prevalent psychogenic cause of a psychosis is a flood of negative emotions, such as fear or anxiety, that drives an individual into a state of panic. When in a state of panic, an individual will naturally seek relief, as it is too mentally and physically draining to subsist in this hyper-emotional state. While escaping from the state of panic can be accomplished through adaptive means, such as facing up to and defeating the fear-generating threat, another way to escape is to undergo a psychotic break. A psychotic break is not a descent into a state of greater disorder, as many believe, but a reordering of one's experiential world, which blends fact and fiction, or delusions and reality, in a way that helps end the feelings of panic. Silvano Arietti, one of the 20th century's foremost authorities on schizophrenia, explains the psychogenic steps that lead to madness. Firstly, there is the phase of panic, when the patient starts to perceive things in a different way, is frightened on account of it, appears confused, and does not know how to explain the strange things that are happening. The next step is what Ariadne calls a phase of psychotic insight, whereby an individual succeeds in putting things together by devising a pathological way of seeing reality which allows him to explain his abnormal experiences. The phenomenon is called insight because the patient finally sees meaning and relations in his experiences. But the insight is psychotic because it is based on delusions, not on adaptive and life-promoting ways of relating to whatever threats precipitated the panic. The delusions, in other words, allow the panic-stricken individual to escape from the flood of negative emotions, but at the cost of losing touch with reality, and for this reason, Ariadne says that a psychotic break can be viewed as an abnormal way of dealing with an extreme state of anxiety. If a panic-triggering flood of negative emotions in a weak and vulnerable individual can trigger a psychotic break, then a mass psychosis can result when a population of weak and vulnerable individuals is driven into a state of panic by threats real, imagined, or fabricated. But as delusions can take many forms, and as madness can manifest in countless ways, the specific manner in which a mass psychosis unfolds will differ based on the historical and cultural context of the infected society. But in the modern era, it is the mass psychosis of totalitarianism that appears to be the greatest threat. Totalitarianism, writes Arthur Versluis, is the modern phenomenon of total centralized state power, coupled with the obliteration of individual human rights. In the totalized state, there are those in power, and there are the objectified masses, the victims. In a totalitarian society, the population is divided into two groups, the rulers and the ruled, and both groups undergo a pathological transformation.
Alright, cool. This gives us like a brief snippet of what we're discussing and gives us some ideas about about why these kind of issues are being prevalent in our society now. But I think we can go on to talk about mental health for so long. So I think we would come back at some point to discuss some other aspects of mental health that we would like to touch on.
So I think we are getting we are in a state of mass psychosis, and you can see that with the prevalence of cancel culture and things like that rifling through society. And one part that I think is something key that we should probably focus on is how do we get people out of mass psychosis? Because he said it's hard for an individual to see the error of their ways. So how do you break out individuals from their own delusion? But to finish off with what he talks about on how people get into that mass psychotic nature, I think it goes back to the original point of those three hormones, cortisol, the stress hormone. So the problem, I told you the benefits of cortisol, it can get you out of bed in the morning, but the downside is if you have uncontrolled amounts of cortisol, it reduces your serotonin levels and causes a counterbalance with your dopamine. So you have that level of high dopamine, low serotonin, and it leads to an addictive nature, which is what we are seeing in society. People get addicted to cancel culture. People get addicted to social media. People they're not really enjoying this activity. I don't think people that are canceling people, you can't tell me you're happy with yourself after you just cancel someone. It makes no sense. But there's clearly a level of addiction to doing it. So it's tied to that level of mass psychosis. So which we can talk on and expand on in a later podcast, but my focus is how do we get people out of that mass psychosis? And my suggestion is let's look at the stress levels, because we can probably see in our level of society now, we think things are going well. We have technology, we have medical advancements, but I would argue that we're living under a lot of stress because there's a level of globalization and global competition. think about people that lived in villages like 50 years ago, 100 years ago. Almost of them shit dead poor. They probably don't have level of standards of living.
And they don't know what's going on in the rest of the world.
Yes, they didn't have that level of stress.
Yeah.
So that level of stress kept them peaceful and they didn't make them crazy. But now that we have a lot of better things, but we are living in this one global village of being constantly stressed with a lot of things happening around us. We talked about last time, you're getting bombarded with images of kids dying, kids that you're not supposed to know died.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? You're actually not supposed to know this information, but we're subjecting ourselves to high levels of stress. I think that's what is contributing a lot to this mass psychosis as causing ailments in our society.
Negativity.
Yeah.
Negativity. Too
much.
much negativity.
Yeah.
And I think this technology of a thing just helps to make us way more stressed.
Yeah.
Like you have all the tools to just keep being productive.
Yeah.
And this same technology show you what people are achieving by being productive and then give you all the tools. I want to say the work some of us do in just a day currently is the mental impact of the work we do in a day.
Yeah.
We can equate it. I am not saying this must be right, but I could equate it to like a week or 2 weeks of work that people used to do before.
What we do in a day.
Yes, mental
heat.
work, yeah. How the mental capacity it requires for us to do a day of work right now, you could equate it to a week or 2 weeks of work, like let's say 30 or 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And you don't know the sad part, the even sadder part. We are not requiring equal capacity of physical attention. Do you understand? Being physical at your work is a good balance of your hormone.
Yeah.
It helps to balance things up. You are physically tired and mentally tired. It helps for you, your body, your hormones to go through therapy and rebuild.
Yeah.
But you literally didn't move a bone and you are mentally tired. How will your body know you are tired? You are only mentally tired. So your body doesn't even know you're tired. That was what we were discussing before coming here. It's only in your head. And your body doesn't know. How can you come back to normal?
Yeah.
I know personally, no matter how mentally tired I am, I just force myself to go to the gym and do really exhausting activities.
Yeah.
So that when I sleep, the tiredness of my brain in my mind will balance with my body and then everything will come together to heal.
Which is what you need.
Yeah, but
yeah. And even just to add on that as well, which is really why we need to study our bodies and study what is happening in us. So to your point of physical stress, of just you're mentally stressed, but putting your body under physical stress as well helps you counterbalance that. I told you cortisol increases the mental stress levels. However, when your body is under physical stress, it produces one of two things. Either produces testosterone or cortisol. It can produce both at the same time. So if you actually go to the gym and work out, you will help. Yes, you have a short boost of cortisol in the physical activity, but in the long term, you have that cortisol drop lower because a lot of your ATP or the energy in your body will start getting converted to testosterone, which is good. Testosterone makes you feel good about doing work, which is why a lot of men are very enthusiastic about physical activities compared to women, because we have higher levels of testosterone. So testosterone also helps your mental stability. Like if you have one of the things to check with especially for men, if men are depressed, is their testosterone levels. Yeah. So having high levels of testosterone can boost your level of self-confidence and self-positivity. So that's an excellent answer to deal with that mental stress. Like if you're undergoing a lot of mental stress, physical exercise and physical activities will help balance your own mental well-being and
honestly,
wellness.
That's one of the key pieces of advice that they give me in my study, like in my tutor. What did I say? My provider, my tuition provider is like, when you're going through studying, actually need to be doing exercise, because obviously your brain is working, because obviously you need to be studying in the evenings and stuff like that, but you need to maintain that physical level of activity. But a lot of people do the opposite. When you're studying, you're not exercising.
Deep shit, man. Like, I swear, it's not a laughing matter. I swear, we are in a very big issue.
In a future pod, we need to discuss what he said, that how to get people out of mass psychosis. Because if we go to another pod, which is what we're literally saying with cancel culture, the epidemic of the psychosis they had with witch hunts, the fact that they nearly killed all the women in the village just because they're chasing some perception of a witch.
Yeah.
We can have that now. We can have cancel culture literally take out a lot of people in society.
Yeah.
Because people are living under this mass psychosis. So we need, it's a very serious issue that we need to address. How do we get each other and all of us out of mental psychosis? So
it's a really serious issue. And
yeah. All right, cool. Let's wrap it up here.